ก่อนเริ่มงานอย่างเป็นทางการนะครับผมจะขออนุญาตนำเรียนข้อมูลภูมิหลังและรายละเอียดต่างๆเกี่ยวกับงานในวันนี้นะครับโครงการ Bridges เป็นโครงการเพื่อดำเนินการจัดงานเวทีแห่งสันติโดยมีกิจกรรมนะครับประกอบด้วยการบรรยายพิเศษการสัมมนาและการประชุมเชิงปฏิบัติการนะครับในด้านวิทยาศาสตร์การเมืองการปกครองการศึกษาเศรษฐกิจศิลปะและสันติโดยเชิญผู้ที่ได้รับรางวัลโนเบลในสาขาเศรษฐศาสตร์ฟิสิกส์เคมีและการแพทย์มาร่วมกล่าวปฐกถาเพื่อแลกเปลี่ยนและส่งเสริมการพัฒนาเพื่อที่จะเป็นพื้นฐานของการสร้างสันติภาพที่ยั่งยืนนะครับเมื่อเดือนเมษายนของปี 2565 ที่ผ่านมานี้นะครับนายอูเว มอร์เวตส์นะครับประธานของ International Peace Foundation หรือว่า IPF นะครับได้เข้าพบกับผู้บริหารสถาบันพระปกเกล้าเพื่อเชิญร่วมเป็นเจ้าภาพจัดงานไทย JAPAN-ASEAN BRIDGES Event Series เพื่อเป็นการเฉลิมฉลองการครบรอบ 50 ปีความสัมพันธ์ญี่ปุ่นอาเซียนโดยกำหนดจัดงานทั้งในญี่ปุ่นและอาเซียนระหว่างเดือนพฤศจิกายน 2566 ถึงเดือนมีนาคมของปี 2567 ปีนี้นะครับโดยในประเทศไทยนะครับสถาบันการศึกษาที่ร่วมเป็นเจ้าภาพมีเช่นจุฬาลงกรณ์มหาวิทยาลัยมหาวิทยาลัยธรรมศาสตร์มหาวิทยาลัยขอนแก่นแล้วก็มหาวิทยาลัยเชียงใหม่สำหรับงานในวันนี้นะครับซึ่ง International Peace Foundation จัดร่วมกับสถาบันพระปกเกล้าได้รับเกียรติจากศาสตราจารย์เอริก สตาร์ก มาสกินเป็นผู้กล่าวปฐกถาพิเศษภายใต้หัวข้อ Why globalization has failed to reduce inequality ศาสตราจารย์เอริก มาสกินนะครับเป็นนักเศรษฐศาสตร์ชาวอเมริกันที่ได้รับรางวัลโนเบลสาขาเศรษฐศาสตร์ในปีพ.ศ. 2550 นะครับจากการเป็นผู้วางรากฐานทฤษฎีการออกแบบกลไกหรือว่า The Foundations of Mechanism Design Theory ขอเรียนว่าศาสตราจารย์มาสกินสำเร็จการศึกษานะครับปริญญาเอกจากมหาวิทยาลัยฮาร์วาร์ดสาขาคณิตศาสตร์ประยุกต์หรือว่า Applied Mathematics และศิลปศาสตร์มหาบัณฑิตกิตติมศักดิ์จากมหาวิทยาลัยเคมบริดจ์นอกจากนี้นะครับศาสตราจารย์มาสกินเคยสอนที่ MIT และได้รับตำแหน่งศาสตราจารย์อัลเบิร์ต โอ เฮิร์ชแมนด้านสังคมศาสตร์จาก Institute for Advanced Study แล้วก็เคยเป็น visiting lecturer ที่มหาวิทยาลัย Princeton ปัจจุบันนะครับดำรงตำแหน่ง Adams University Professor แล้วศาสตราจารย์ด้านเศรษฐศาสตร์ที่มหาวิทยาลัย Harvard ครับในส่วนของกำหนดการนะครับของอีเวนต์ในวันนี้ช่วงเวลา 13.50 ถึง 14.50 นาฬิกานะครับจะประกอบด้วยการกล่าวเปิดงานนะครับโดยท่านอาจารย์ดร.ถวินวดีบุรีกุลนะครับรองเลขาธิการสถาบันพระปกเกล้าต่อด้วยการกล่าวต้อนรับและวัตถุประสงค์นะครับของการจัดงานโดยนายอูเว มอราเวตส์นะครับประธานของ International Peace Foundation หลังจากนั้นนะครับจะเป็นการกล่าวปฐกถาพิเศษโดยศาสตราจารย์เอริก มาสกินระหว่าง 14.00 นาฬิกาถึง 14.45 นาฬิกาต่อด้วยการถามตอบประมาณ 30 นาทีครับสำหรับการถามตอบนะครับขอเรียนเชิญพี่ๆทุกท่านนะครับถามศาสตราจารย์มาสกินนะครับได้ทั้งภาษาไทยแล้วก็ภาษาอังกฤษนะครับแล้วก็ขอความกรุณาพี่ๆที่ถามคำถามนะครับช่วยแนะนำตัวก่อนถามคำถามด้วยครับสุดท้ายนะครับก็จะเป็นการกล่าวปิดงานนะครับโดยท่านรองเลขาธิการสถาบันพระปกเกล้าครับวันนี้นะครับโดยที่มีผู้เข้าร่วมการประชุมนะครับมีพี่ๆจากหลายๆหลักสูตรนะครับไม่ว่าจะเป็นพี่ๆจากปปร.ปนป.ปสส.แท็กนะครับปรม.แล้วก็มีผู้เข้าร่วมรับชมนะครับจากทาง Facebook แล้วก็ระบบ Zoom Meetingนะครับแล้วก็จะมีผู้แทนจากทั้งหน่วยงานภาครัฐสถาบันการศึกษาองค์กรอิสระแล้วก็ผู้แทนจากภาคเอกชนทั้งในไทยและต่างประเทศนะครับเมื่อเริ่มงานอย่างเป็นทางการนะครับผมจะขออนุญาตดำเนินรายการเป็นภาษาอังกฤษตามที่ได้รับมอบหมายนะครับ executives of the King Prajadhipok's Institute, executives of the International Peace Foundation, Professor Eric Stark Maskin, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Bridges Nobel Laureate Talk here at the King Prajadhipok's Institute in Bangkok, Thailand. My name is Aditat Panupong, and I'm from the Department of International Organizations, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Thailand, and I'm also a student of KPI's P&P course, Batch 13. Please allow me to be your Master of Ceremony for today's event. Our event today, co-hosted by the International Peace Foundation and the King Prajadhipok's Institute, is part of the Japan-ASEAN Bridges event series, which the International Peace Foundation is facilitating in Japan and Thailand from November 2023 to March 2024. In commemorating the 50th anniversary of the official relations between Japan and ASEAN, the Bridges event series comprises major events in Thailand and Japan, with Nobel laureates from various fields conducting lectures, seminars, workshops, and dialogues to foster exchanges and enhance further development and cooperation. Today, we have the honor and the privilege of listening to a keynote speech on why globalization has failed to reduce inequality by Professor Eric Stark Maskin, Nobel Laureate for Economics, Adams University Professor and Professor of Economics and Mathematics at Harvard University. To officially commence the program, may I invite Dr. Thawinwadi Burikul, Deputy Secretary General of the King Prajadhipok's Institute, to kindly deliver the opening remarks, please.
Good afternoon. Professor Eric Stark Maskin, International Peace Foundation Board Chairman, Mr. Uwe Morawetz, KPI committee members, distinguished and honored guests, and all KPI course participants. It gives me great pleasure to warmly welcome you all to attend this lecture in the Japan-ASEAN Bridges event series, jointly organized by King Prajadhipok Institute and the International Peace Foundation. We are facing social and economic crisis born that will affect the quality of life of all mankind. King Prajadhipok Institute and the International Peace Foundation are concerned with this situation, so therefore hope to find means of reducing inequality and enhancing quality of life. In the spirit of educational exchange, we are proud and excited to be co-hosting this special event with keynote speaker, Nobel Laureate for Economics Professor Eric Stark Maskin on a most pertinent topic, why globalization has failed to reduce inequality. Before we begin, I wish to take this opportunity to convey our thanks to those who have made this event possible. First and foremost, Professor Maskin for making time to speak here, to the International Peace Foundation for inviting King Prajadhipok Institute to participate in this event series, and to generous sponsor for this event, BMW Group Thailand, Dusit Thani Hotels and Resources, Kasikorn Bank and Mitsui Fudosan Group, and to the interested participants in attendance today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Deputy Secretary General, for your opening remarks. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to invite Mr. Uwe Morawetz, Chairman of the International Peace Foundation, to kindly deliver his remarks, please.
So welcome to the Japan-ASEAN Bridges event series facilitated by the Vienna-based International Peace Foundation. Commemorating the 50th anniversary of official relations between Japan and the ASEAN region, Bridges will be continuously held in Thailand and Japan until March, involving the participation of Nobel laureates for physics, chemistry, medicine, and economics. The Japan-ASEAN Bridges series follows the series of over 800 Bridges events, which the International Peace Foundation has facilitated since 2003 to support education in the ASEAN region. Increasing ethnic, political, religious, and social conflicts and the helplessness to respond to them without further stimulating the spiral of violence show us peace is not a given good. It has to be constantly learned, experienced, and created anew. Peace is not a passive state. Peace is a process which needs time, attention, and the participation of all of us. And peace begins with education. The seeds of peace need to be planted in schools, in universities, in the new generation. This is why the International Peace Foundation cooperates with the major schools and universities in realizing this Bridges program. We believe in the importance of the education and scientific community here in Thailand by bringing the knowledge of Nobel laureates to this country. What these highly in-demand Nobel laureates normally see of a country are airports and hotels. They deliver the lecture, they stay for one night, and they leave. In this case, though, we have invited them not only to speak, but to share, to engage, to listen. They come here not only for one day or one event only, but for various dialogues and events without requesting any honorarium, because of their real interest in building bridges, because of their real interest in Thailand. It is our hope that these are not first and final visits of these Nobel laureates, but visits with many fruitful returns to build long-lasting friendships and to start research programs or other forms of cooperation with the local universities and schools. This is how bridges can develop into a long-term and sustainable success for Thailand to strengthen education as a basis for peace. I thank King Prajadhipok's Institute and the organizing committee of today's event for taking up this opportunity of our cooperation and for inviting today the 2007 Nobel Laureate for Economics, Professor Eric Maskin, to this prestigious institute. We look forward to his keynote speech and to his important contribution to build bridges. Welcome, Professor Maskin.
Well, thank you very much. I first want to check that the sound is all right in the back. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, I will take your word for it. First, I'd like to thank KPI for inviting me here today. This is actually my first visit to this institute. But thanks to the International Peace Foundation, I've been able to visit Bangkok and Thailand 3 times. This is my 3rd visit, and I hope the fact that I keep coming back tells you about how much I have gotten out of these visits. It's really been extraordinary. This afternoon, I'd like to talk about 2 big topics: globalization and inequality, and the connection between those 2 big ideas. We're all aware that we're in an era of vast globalization, which has transformed the economies of practically every country in the world. You only have to go to your local shop to see that it's now possible to buy products from almost any place in the world. So one important effect of globalization has been to internationalize the set of available goods and services that you have access to. But another important aspect of globalization, and I will be concentrating on this later on, is that the process of production itself has been internationalized, so that when a good is produced, different components of that good come from different parts of the world. And I will be talking more about that later on. Now, why has globalization occurred? One reason, of course, is that it's now cheaper to ship things to almost any part of the earth. So there's been a decline in transport costs, but even more important, there's been a decline in communication costs. And so if you are trying to produce a complicated good like a computer, which involves production in many parts of the world, it's very easy to coordinate that production thanks to modern communication technology. Now, the proponents of globalization have made two big promises on behalf of globalization. One promise is that it would bring prosperity to emerging economies. And that promise has been kept. Globalization has been an enormously effective engine of growth and prosperity for China, for India, for Thailand. None of these countries would be where they are today were it not for globalization. China was one of the poorer countries in the world 40 years ago, and now it has the second largest economy in the world, and that difference owes most of its possibility to globalization. But another promise that was made on behalf of globalization is that it would reduce inequality. It would reduce the gap between the haves and the have-nots in emerging economies. And sadly, this promise has not been kept. In fact, in many emerging economies, inequality has increased. Just the opposite of what was hoped for. Now, from a traditional economics point of view, the fact that inequality has increased is actually a bit of a surprise, because it contradicts one of the best established theories in economics, a theory that goes back over 200 years. It's called the theory of comparative advantage. And the theory of comparative advantage has been a very successful theory. We are going through a period of globalization at the moment, but there have been previous periods of globalization. And in every previous period of globalization, inequality decreased in emerging economies, just as the theory of comparative advantage predicts that it should. So what I'd like to do today is to start with a theory of comparative advantage and explore why it makes this prediction that inequality should decrease, and then go on from that to see why the globalization that we are living through today is so different from the previous periods of globalization. So the economists here probably know something about the theory of comparative advantage because it's such an important part of economics. What this theory says is that the reason that trade takes place between different countries is that different countries have different inputs into production. Different countries one country is better than another at producing one kind of good, and the other country is better than the other at producing another kind of good, and so they trade with one another. Now, and the reason there's this difference is because of the inputs to production. I want to concentrate today, to make matters simple, on just two kinds of inputs. I will call them high-skilled labor and low-skilled labor. High-skilled labor corresponds to people, workers, who have a lot of skill, who have had training and education, which gives them a lot of skill that they can bring to the labor force. Low-skilled labor, those are people without such skills. And to discuss the theory of comparative advantage, I want to compare two countries, a rich country and an emerging economy. Now, why is the rich country rich? It's rich because it has a high proportion of high-skilled labor. A country is only as rich as the people in the country. Countries are wealthy because they have high-skill labor, people with lots of skills. In a rich country with a lot of high-skilled workers, that country will have a comparative advantage at producing goods that require a lot of high-skill input. So an example of such a good is computer software. For computer software, you need software engineers who are highly trained to produce the code that drives the software. You don't need much low-skill labor at all for computer software. Now, an emerging economy, which has a low fraction of high-skill labor and a lot of low-skill workers, an emerging economy will have a comparative advantage at producing goods where skill doesn't matter so much. Examples of those kinds of goods are, say, agricultural products. So rice, for example, doesn't require a lot of schooling to produce. You don't need high-skilled labor to produce rice. Now, to understand how globalization affects production and affects inequality, I want to do a thought experiment. I want to look at the rich country and the emerging economy before globalization occurs, that is, before the two countries can trade with one another, and I want to compare that with the situation after globalization becomes possible, after the two countries can trade, and the difference between those two situations will be attributable to globalization. So what will happen before trade occurs, before globalization? Well, in the rich country, of course, people will want both software and rice, and so both software and rice will have to be produced in the rich country. And similarly, in the emerging economy, people will want both software and rice, so both software and rice will have to be produced in the emerging economy. There's no possibility of getting either good from elsewhere because we're assuming that this is pre-globalization. But notice that there's a sense in which when the emerging economy is producing software, that's making inefficient use of the labor force. The labor force is well suited for rice. It's not so well suited for software. And so if production is being diverted away from rice to software, that is going to hurt low-skilled workers because they're not needed for the software production. They are needed for the rice production. So the fact that this software is being produced in the emerging economy means that the demand for low-skilled labor is reduced since the software doesn't require low-skilled labor, and that means that low-skilled wages will be comparatively low. On the other hand, high-skilled workers in the emerging economy will do very well from the software production because they are needed a lot, and the fact that the software is being produced creates demand for high-skilled workers and means that their wages will be comparatively high. So now I've described how things are before globalization. What happens once we open the door to trade and allow the rich country to buy rice from the emerging economy and the emerging economy to buy software from the rich country? Well, the rich country no longer needs to produce rice. It can shift away from rice and produce software, more software than before, and it can import the rice from the emerging economy, and the emerging economy can shift production away from software to rice and import the software from the rich country. And both countries are better off because both countries are specializing in the goods that their labor force is best suited for. But in particular, the emerging economy is now producing more rice and less software than before, and that raises the demand for low-skilled workers because they are needed for the rice production. And it reduces the demand for the high-skilled workers because not as much software is being produced as before. So low-skill wages will rise because low-skill labor is in greater demand, and high-skill wages will fall because high-skill labor is in less demand. And that means that inequality in the emerging economy is reduced as a result of globalization. What I've just described is the prediction that the theory of comparative advantage makes about inequality after globalization. It predicts that inequality will be reduced. Now, there have been many periods of globalization over the last 200 years or so. One of the most dramatic periods of globalization was in the late 19th century, when, because of the improvement in shipping, there was a very rapid increase in trade between Europe and North America. And interestingly, the theory of comparative advantage worked perfectly in predicting what would happen. It predicted that inequality in Europe, where most of the low-skilled labor was, would decrease. And that's exactly what happens. But as I already noted at the beginning of my talk, the theory does not apply so well to the recent period of globalization, where emerging economies have seen a dramatic increase in inequality. Now, you might ask, well, why should we care about inequality? I would say perhaps the most important reason for caring about inequality is that countries with very high degrees of inequality and increasing inequality are less stable. They are less stable politically. This is a well-known connection, and because of instability, the risk of instability, it's very important for countries to try to attack the inequality problem. But in order to attack the inequality problem, you have to first understand where it's coming from, why there is growing inequality. And so that's what I want to turn to. That's what I want to turn to now. I want to turn to an alternative theory that I have been developing in collaboration with another economist, Michael Kramer, who is a former student of mine, and I'm also proud to say that he's a recent Nobel Laureate for his work in development economics. And what we stress, and this is something that I mentioned a few minutes ago, is that globalization doesn't just mean trade, international trade in goods, it also means the internationalization of the production process itself. And to understand what I mean, think of a modern good like a computer. To produce a computer requires many contributions. You might have the computer designed in one country, say the United States. It might be programmed in another part of the world, say Europe, and then assembled in still another part of the world, China. In other words, the production process itself is global. And computers are just one example out of thousands. Most of our modern products, particularly high-tech products, are very much the outcome of international production. And as you will see, it's international production which helps us understand inequality. Now, for this alternative theory, I'm actually going to assume more than just two levels of skill. So rather than there being high-skilled labor and low-skilled labor, there will be 4 levels of skill. To do the analysis, I'm going to keep matters simple, and I'm still going to talk about just 2 countries. There'll be a rich country, and there will be an emerging economy. The rich country, once again, is rich because it has workers of higher skill levels than the emerging economy. I'm going to talk about 4 levels, A, B, C, and D, where A is higher skill than B, B is higher skill than C, C is higher skill than D. The D workers are the least skilled of all. They're probably workers who are in subsistence agriculture, something like that. Now, this is a theory which is going to concentrate on production. And imagine that in order to produce goods, different tasks need to be accomplished. Let's suppose that there are just 2 tasks. There's a managerial task, which requires high skill level. So the managerial task is sensitive to the skill of the person accomplishing that task. And there's another task which I'll call the subordinate task, which is less sensitive to skill. And we'll suppose that we get outputs, we get production by matching workers together to perform these tasks. So we take one worker and put her in the managerial task. We take another worker, we put him into the subordinate task, and together they produce the output. But the amount of output that is generated depends on the skill levels of the workers occupying or performing the 2 tasks. Now, this is the only slightly mathematical part of the talk. I hope it doesn't put anyone off. But I have this this formula which says that output is equal to the square of the manager's task times the the square of the skill of the manager times the skill of the subordinates. So why is the managerial skill squared? It's to indicate that the managerial task is more sensitive to skill. We square the skill, whereas the subordinate task is not squared. It's not that the skill level of the subordinate doesn't matter as much. So for example, suppose we put a person of skill level 4 in the managerial task and a person of skill level 3 in the subordinate task, then according to this formula, we would get output of 4 squared, that is 4 times 4, times 3, the skill level of the subordinate, for a total of 48. I hope this is reasonably clear. That the main point I'm making is that the manager's skill matters more than the subordinate skill. Now, if we have a labor force, there are, of course, different ways that people in the labor force could be matched together to produce outputs. let's imagine that we have a labor force consisting of 2 workers of skill level 3 and 2 workers of skill level 4. One way of matching those workers together would be like this, where we have a 4 worker matched with a 3 worker. So the 4 worker has the manager's job, the 3 worker has the subordinate's job, and then the other 4 worker is matched with the other 3 worker. If you do the calculation, this will lead to a total output of 96. So this matching leads to output 4 squared times 3, or 48, and then this one also contributes 48, grand total of 96. But another way of matching the workers together is like this. You could match one of the 4 workers with the other 4 worker, and you could match one of the 3 workers with the other 3 worker, and if you do that calculation, you'll get an output of 91. Now 91 is less than 96, so that means that this is for this particular labor force, where we have 2 3 workers and 2 4 workers, we will get this kind of matching. I call this cross-matching because we have workers of different skills working together to produce outputs in the same in the same productive enterprise. So we're going across different skill levels. This I call homogeneous matching because within any productive units, all the workers have the same skill. 4 over here, 3 over here. Now, if we change the labor force, we might change the matching. If we had two workers and 2 4 workers. So I'm changing the 3 to 2. We have 2 workers, 2 4 workers. Now if you do the calculation, you'll see that you get more output with homogeneous matching. And the reason why you get more output with homogeneous matching is that the gap between 2 and 4 is too big to put workers of different skill levels together. You see, if the gap between the manager and the subordinate is too big in skill, then the fact that the manager has a higher skill level is going to waste because she's being paired with a subordinate whose skill is not going to contribute much to output. So for this kind of labor force, it's better to have homogeneous matching. Okay, how does all of this apply? How does all of this apply to inequality? Well, let's do the same kind of thought experiment we did when we were looking at the theory of comparative advantage. Let's look at the world before globalization, and let's look at the world after globalization. In this case, globalization means that you can have production across national boundaries. But before globalization becomes possible, all production has to occur within a country. You can't have some workers from one country being matched with other workers in another country. So this is the typical picture that we would get before globalization, before international production becomes possible. In the rich country, we'll have the A workers matched with the B workers. Remember, the rich country has higher skill levels. In the poor country, we have C workers matched with D workers, but no international production, no workers in the emerging economy who are being matched with workers in the rich country. But now let's imagine that because of declining communication costs, it becomes possible to have international production. Then we get a very different matching picture. We get a picture like this, where now we can have C workers in the emerging economy working with B workers in the rich country. Actually, for our purposes, it doesn't matter what happens to the A workers and the D workers, except to note that the D workers have skills that are so low that they cannot be matched with workers in the rich country. The skill gap is too big. Remember, I said if you have too big a skill gap, it's not efficient to match workers together. Now, what is the implication of this contrast? Well, you see, this shows that in the emerging economy, it's going to be only the C workers who benefit from globalization. Before globalization, the C workers could only match with D workers, or perhaps they could match with other C workers. But there weren't any B workers or A workers around for them to match to. But post-globalization, they can match with B workers. In other words, they have new job opportunities thanks to globalization. And those new job opportunities give them a higher income level than they had before. So we will expect C workers' incomes to go up as a result of globalization. They are in demand. The C workers are in demand by global labor markets. But the D workers, their skill level is too low. They don't get new matching opportunities, and they don't see an improvement in their incomes. So the C workers' incomes rise, the D workers' incomes stay the same, and inequality in the emerging economy increases. So this is the explanation for why the current globalization is so different from the globalization of the 19th century. Because of international production, moderately skilled workers in emerging economies get new opportunities, but low-skill workers, D workers in emerging economies don't get new opportunities, and so the gap between the C workers and the D workers increases. This is just repeating what I've already said. So let me conclude by talking about the implications of this theory, and I think this theory is correct, for policy. I said that it's important for political stability, for social stability, for emerging economies with high inequality to try to attack that inequality because they're at risk for destabilization otherwise. Now, what does this theory say will be an effective way of attacking inequality? Well, of course, one way of attacking inequality is to try to stop globalization altogether. But that would be a mistake because, as we noted in the first place, globalization does create a lot of new prosperity. It does raise the average income of a country dramatically. The problem, of course, is that it doesn't raise the income of everybody the same amount. It raises the C workers' income, it doesn't raise the D workers' income. So the answer to inequality is to try to raise the skill level of the D workers by giving them enough skill through education and job training so that they have international job opportunities as well. That's the basic idea. But it's not that simple, because education and job training are expensive. Somebody has to pay for them. Who is going to pay? Well, the workers themselves, the D workers themselves, can't afford to pay because they're D workers. They're very poor. So they're not going to be able to fund their own education and job training programs. But notice that that producers, employers of workers don't have the incentive to do the training because the training is expensive. For example, imagine that I'm a D worker and you're a potential employer. Yes, you could train me to do your job. You could invest in my skill level. But once I have the skills necessary to do your job, I don't have to work for you. I can leave and work for anybody. And if I leave, your investment in me is lost. And that means that you're going to hesitate to train me in the first place, because there's no way that you can be guaranteed to get a return on that investment. I might simply walk away. So that tells us that employers are not likely to make the investment either. And that tells us that some third party is going to have to pay for the investment, and the obvious third party is government. So the conclusion that I draw from all of this is that, yes, inequality can be successfully dealt with, but it's not going to happen automatically, because workers can't afford the training necessary. Employers don't have the incentive to provide the training, and so someone else has to pay for the investment. And the obvious third party is domestic government. What domestic government can do is, I mean, they don't have to do the training themselves. What they can do is to give employers the incentive to invest in skill training. They can, for example, give a company a tax break if it trains D workers, or it can give a company a bonus or subsidy if it trains D workers. Or the government can subsidize education. It can make investments in educational centers which will give D workers the skills they need to go out and find jobs. There are lots of things government can do, but the important thing is that government needs to act. The problem does not solve itself. So to sum up, if you accept this theory, and there's actually quite a lot of evidence confirming the theory, the response is not to try to stop globalization. Globalization is very much a positive force for growth and prosperity, but to allow the D workers, the low-skill workers, to share in the fruit of globalization by investing in their training. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Maskin, for the very, very insightful keynote speech. We will now invite members of the audience to put forward questions for Professor Maskin. And the questions may be either in Thai or English. And if it is to be in Thai, I will try my best to translate the questions for you.
Excuse me. Yeah. ผมชื่อพันตำรวจโทวสุเทพใจอินครับเป็นนักศึกษาหลักสูตรปนป.รุ่น13ครับแล้วก็คำถามที่จะมีก็คือจากที่ได้ฟังมาครับผมรู้สึกว่าก็ค่อนข้างที่ประเทศไทยเราเนี่ยปัจจุบันรัฐบาลของเราเนี่ยมีนโยบายที่เกี่ยวกับเรื่องของซอฟต์พาวเวอร์ซึ่งตอนที่เขาหาเสียงเนี่ยเขาได้พูดถึงเกี่ยวกับเรื่องการที่เขาต้องการยกระดับคนในพื้นที่ให้แต่ละพื้นที่เนี่ยเขามีสกิลที่มากขึ้นซึ่งแต่ละพื้นที่ในประเทศไทยเนี่ยก็จะแตกต่างกันไปโดยยกระดับอาจจะเป็น1ตำบล1ซอฟต์พาวเวอร์อะไรประมาณนี้ซึ่งก็คิดว่ามันก็ค่อนข้างที่จะสอดคล้องกับทฤษฎีที่อาจารย์พูดมาก็เลยคิดว่าอาจารย์มีความเห็นอย่างไรเกี่ยวกับนโยบายของรัฐบาลในส่วนตรงนี้เป็นไปได้ไหมที่จะลดความเหลื่อมล้ำในประเทศไทยได้ครับขอบคุณครับ
Thank you very much ขอบคุณครับพี่เป็นไทย My friend from the PNP course here, he's a police officer. And first of all, he would like to express his thanks to you for giving that very insightful keynote speech. Now, his questions relate to your views on the Thai government's policy to alleviate the lives of the people in the Thai communities around the country. So, as a background, he noted that the Thai government, the current administration, during their election campaign, they advocated that they would like to use soft power to uplift the lives of the people, especially the people in the different communities throughout the country. And Mr. Bentai wanted to ask you, what are your views on this? Do you think, the Thai government could really alleviate the lives of the people in the community through soft power?
It would help me if someone actually clarified what soft power is. I'm not entirely sure what the government means by this term.
Would anyone want to try explaining to Professor Maskin on this?
I think in the meaning of the government, they tell us in the when they in the election period, they tell about they want to train the skill of people in Thailand. One city, one skill, and they mean that is the soft power in their opinion. That I hearing from the election period. I think it's not the soft power. It's just upskill in one, but they use soft power to be kind of buzzword to make the Thai people okay I want to this city have this skill, this city have this skill. I think it's สอดคล้องกับทฤษฎีที่อาจารย์พูดมาเลยฮะ
Okay, well, if soft power means trying to raise skills of lower skilled workers, then I couldn't agree more. That's exactly what this theory is suggesting. Basically, there are two ways of dealing with inequality, and both ways, I think, have some merits. This is one way, that is, you invest in improving skills for people who don't have very high skills, and you give them the opportunity to improve their own lives. Another approach is redistribution. That is, you have rich people, you have poor people, you tax the rich, you give the money to the poor. That can be effective too, to an extent. But the problem with doing that on a permanent basis is that you create dependency. The poor people come to depend on the money that they're getting from the government. And that money can be very important in the short run. If there's an emergency, if there's a downturn in the economy, a recession, having that kind of redistribution can be essential. But to put it in place permanently creates dependency. And so I think that whatever you want to do about redistribution, it's important also to try to do the first thing, that is to raise skills, because then people are in charge of their own lives. They have the skills to earn good incomes on their own. They don't have to rely on the governments.
Thank you, Professor. I think we have a lot of questions coming up. If I may go to the back of the room first.
Hi, Professor Maskin. I'm a researcher here at KPI, so I have two questions actually. So I want to ask if we're really talking about upgrading the skills of the workers and laborers, and it's a lot of investment, and it's a long-term investment. So with the democratic system that we're using now, with the term limit of 4 years or maybe 8 years per government maximum, how do we promote the continuity or the continuity of policy of investing in people and investing in something that you cannot see the return within 4 years? So how do you promote that? And my second question is, assuming that pre-globalization do have inequality, and that does exist, and now at the present day that we're living in, we do see a larger gap of inequality. But how do we say which degree or to what extent that inequality is acceptable for our world today? Thank you.
Two very good questions. Let me take the second one first. I don't think there's a magic number by which we can say if inequality is above this level, it's bad, and if it's below this level, it's acceptable. A standard way that economists measure inequality is through what's called the Gini coefficients, which gives you a rough idea of the degree of inequality. I think more important than the absolute number, though, is the direction in which it's moving. And the problem with globalization has been that it has tended to make inequality higher and higher. And that, quite apart from the absolute level of inequality, is what is destabilizing. Because if D workers see the C workers moving farther and farther ahead of them, that's naturally going to cause resentment. And to fight that trend, something needs to be done, even if it's a long-term project that convinces the D workers that they're going to have a chance to keep up, at least keep up with the C workers. They may not catch them, but they're not going to be left entirely behind. Around the world today, we are seeing more and more of what I would call populist political figures offering easy solutions to very difficult problems like inequality. But the reason why these populist figures are able to make any headway at all is because of growing inequality. People resent the inequality, and they turn to populists, even though populists don't give real answers, because at least they give some answer, even if it's not a very effective one. But that leads me to your first question. How is it possible to have sustained investment in skill over the time that it takes to make a difference? That's a hard question. And I think the only real hope that we have is through political leadership. A good political leader, a political leader who really wants to solve big social problems like inequality, not only has to understand what is causing the problems, and that's what this theory is directed to, but has to know how to communicate what is going on with the public. That's an essential combination, which unfortunately these days seems to be a rare combination. But I can give you examples from history of political leaders who were able to get that combination right. In my own country, there was Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt was president of the United States at a very, very dark time for the U.S. and for the world in the 1930s, when there was the most serious economic depression that the country had ever faced, that the world had ever faced. And he wanted to do something about that. But what had to be done was actually quite complicated and required investment over many years. He took the time to explain what he was doing. He held what were called fireside chats, where every week ordinary people would sit next to their radios. There was no television in those days. They would sit next to their radios, and Roosevelt would explain what he was doing, how this was going to help D-workers, and why they should be patient, why they should not necessarily expect change overnight. And people listened and they understood. People do understand good arguments, but it takes a skilled communicator to deliver the argument in a form that is persuasive. So that, I think, is really what our world needs at the moment, not just correct diagnoses of the problem and solutions. We actually pretty much know that already, but we need the political leadership to put those solutions into effect in a persuasive way.
Thank you, Professor Maskin. I think we have a question from our associate Professor Chumpun.
Thank you, Professor Maskin. My name is Chumpunut. I'm teaching economics for a living. I originally have two questions, but one, the KPI researcher already asked. So I think I'll go for the reflection, of hearing what you have been saying today. There's no denying that, Thailand, inequality situation, has matched well, with your alternative theory today. So I'm not sure whether it's embarrassing or, happy, to hear that, finally we have the model that can, explain what's going on, in the country. But I really like your answer, and I hope the politicians sitting here, can hear that and from someone basically not having the background of political and economic, like knowledge, right? Kind of Thailand, kind of reflect this to our country. But as you give me a mic, so can I ask you some kind of personal question? The thing is, I think we are living in a digital age era, right? Tending to deglobalization, even though you are kind of support of globalization, but there's pros and cons, right? And we are living in the diversifying world. So how young economists, I want to be called young as well, young economists, like me or others, should do, what would be your recommendation as the motivator for us?
Well, you young economists have a lot of work to do. But that should be something to be grateful for, because for me, one of the greatest pleasures of the career I've had is to be able to think and to contribute to the solutions for some of the major problems of our time. There are really major problems to be faced in the coming years. And I think economists have a special role to play in solving these problems. Economists, by their very training, are analytical. They want to get to the bottom of a complicated problem, and they also have the tools to figure out solutions to those problems. Some of the problems of the future include climate change. Some of them include how are we going to adjust to the artificial intelligence revolution? How are we going to relax political tensions in the world, between Israel and the Palestinians, between Ukraine and Russia, between China and the United States? All of these problems have an important economic component that we economists can grapple with. So, for example, in the U.S.-Chinese conflicts, you don't need me to tell you that relations between the U.S. and China at the moment are worse than they've been in many years. They've been deteriorating, not getting better. And I think one solution to that problem is for the two countries to re-engage economically, to stop the decoupling, and to develop a greater tolerance of the political differences. The U.S. may resent the fact that China is not democratic and that there are human rights violations and that China is threatening Taiwan. But those things are not going to change in the near future. In the same way that the U.S. was able to develop a live and let live policy with the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union existed, I think it could develop a similar tolerance of China. And in exchange for that, in exchange for a more forgiving attitude toward China, China can stop its threats on Taiwan. Taking over Taiwan is not going to do China much good anyway. They're going. It's mainly for nationalistic reasons, not for any substantive reason that this insistence that Taiwan belongs to China is always being put forward. So both countries have much to gain by re-engaging and being more tolerant of the other, making some concessions to the other's current position.
Thank you, Professor. Do we have any more questions from the audience in the room today? Cap, please.
From here, that's.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Maskin. I'm Thanapon from the Public Admission and Law in Student KPI of KPI. I'm today more understand after sit in your class. Thank you very much. Then for me, I believe the theory of comparative advantage. Yeah. If you like to contribute of our country to the high income level, we need to make the upskill worker and up the high performance production in our country. But anyway, we don't have the more choice. Today, our country start to 20% of aging society. We don't have too much the label, the young label, today we have a very old people. That's why we need to up more skill and up high like education for our people. That we need to know for your idea for the primary factor to protect the rich country, to make the inequality to our country or emerging country. Thank you, Professor. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that aligns very much with what you said, being that upskilling the labor,
exactly.
the D workers is very important.
I agree completely with what you've just said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the comment and observation. Now I think we have one more question from the lady in the second row. Chen Cap.
Okay, good afternoon, Professor Maskin. So my name is Vipada. I'm from Jista. So mostly we work in the image satellite. Okay. So in my opinion about this work is really, I'm overwhelmed. I was like really happy to hear because my background in bachelor in economics, I was like, I'm learning comparative advantage and everything. This is really new to me. But my questions will be, so GISTA is working a lot in the agriculture sector because we work in the satellite and everything. So I would like to hear your opinion about agriculture because you mentioned that mostly D worker, it will come with the agriculture. But how do we move them from D to A? But we don't want them to move out of their industry, right? Yeah, we don't want them to be like farmer to software engineer. So how do we improve their skill, like from agriculture sector, from like to be farmer to be a better farmer? Because mostly when I go visit the farmer, they would like to have like more technology and more everything. But the thing is, now we don't really have, let's say farmers don't have as much as knowledge, and also we don't really have technology that really suitable for agriculture. What is your suggestion for the agriculture sector for this?
Right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right that it wouldn't make sense to try to turn all of the farmers into software engineers. But what does make sense is to allow them to learn modern agricultural techniques. So a lot of farmers, not just in Thailand, but in many other emerging economies around the world, are using techniques that go back decades, if not centuries. And those techniques are outdated. And we now know how to get vastly higher crop yields using modern techniques. For example, GMOs. So when I talk about an investment in job training or investment in skill, I mean an investment in modern techniques. And that is certainly feasible. It is being done. It just needs to be done on a bigger scale.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have a question at the back of the room, please.
Thank you very much. I am Puripat Krenopalat. I am a researcher at the Office of Innovation for Democracy, King Prajadhipok Institute here. Thank you very much for the wonderful lectures. You know, I am pretty much convinced and agree with your policy implication. You know, that we need to raise the skill of D workers, right? But let me share something about Thailand's situation right now. You know, as you can see from outside, you can see the air quality of Thailand. PM 2.5, the fine particulate pollen, right? And I try to look it up, you know, both on the internet and from academics, said that Thailand is the second largest exporter of sugarcane, yeah? And the largest importer of the sugarcane are Western countries, including the United States. And what is the problem here in Thailand is we are quite a, what you may call the emerging economy countries, which we do not have a lot of capitals or, you know, or you could say surplus value to sustain these problems. After they harvest sugarcane, you know, to produce sugar or something else, they have to remove the remains of the sugarcanes. And the only way that they can cut the cost of removing it is to burn it down, you know. And burning causes a lot of pollutions, such as the air qualities we are facing nowadays. And so it is an annual problem that in winters, you know, in late December till the beginning of the years, that air quality in Thailand is very bad, you know, and I try to look it up, the similar countries in the world that they are the largest exporter of sugarcane. It is Brazil, and they face the same problem as us, the air quality is PM 2.5. So my point here is how do we deal with these problems that our main exports, our main income are from the export of such agricultural products. As the earlier comments said, that how do we increase the skill of agricultural workers, but still want them to remain being agricultural workers? Is this necessary to keep them as a low-skill worker, or do we need to shift them or develop them into a more of a skilled worker and to develop Thailand from emerging economy to be a rich economy countries? And if we do that, you know, let's say that that is a success vision, that Thailand has completed and shift out from agricultural country into industrial countries, or, you know, any other sectors of economy. And who will grow the sugarcane to feed the world? Who will grow rice and agricultural products? Or do we still need to exploit from the poorer countries, the countries that are poorer than us? And how do we do that? How do we solve this problem? Or it is going to be a cycle, what we could call it a chain of exploitation. Thank you very much.
Well, you've asked a big question, and I can't claim that I am an expert enough on the Thai economy to do your question justice. Although I visited here a few times, I need to learn a lot more before I can really give advice on the subject of the Thai economy. But let me mention by comparison another emerging economy which to some extent has dealt with the same kinds of questions that are facing Thailand, and that's China. China 40 years ago was almost completely an agricultural country, and a very poor one. And what they have done is two things in order to move toward higher prosperity. They very much upgraded their agricultural techniques so that with fewer farmers, they could produce the same or even more output, agricultural output, as before. But that meant that they didn't need as many farmers anymore. And a lot of people who had been working in the agricultural sector were able to move to the city and move into manufacturing. And that combination, improving agriculture, but also reducing the absolute number of people in the agricultural sector and ramping up the manufacturing sector, was part of the secret of the Chinese success. So perhaps that model can help Thais understand what needs to be done here.
Thank you very much, Professor Maskin. Yes, the gentleman in the middle row, please.
Thank you very much, Professor. I am Pongsak Sombun from the Politics and Governance Democratic System course, KPI. I wonder, does the globalization just begin for reduce inequality at the beginning, or is just the way to take advantage by the rich country and to the emerging country? At the beginning, the first question. And the second question is, for yours, you said that if theory correct, so we not to stop globalization. But suppose if the theory is not correct, can we stop globalization now? Thank you.
Okay. So on your first question, is globalization just a way of allowing rich countries to exploit emerging economies? I have no doubt that some people in rich countries were thinking that way, but the fact is that globalization has worked as far as raising the prosperity of emerging economies. And the reason I say that is that there have been enormous GDP increases in countries like China, India. Actually, Thailand is a good example of a place where globalization has worked remarkably successfully. If you go back 30 years or so, about 50% or more of the population was living in poverty. That's not true anymore. I think it's less than 10% now. That difference owes a lot to globalization. The fact that Thailand is able to generate income from exports. So whatever the motivation was originally, it has worked in favor of emerging economies, except for the fact that inequality has been increasing. But that inequality problem is solvable. It just requires the political will to solve it. Now, your second question is...
my second question is
globalization...
Suppose if the theory is not correct, can we stop globalization now?
Yeah, I don't think we can. But I don't think we want to stop it because it's used right, that is coupled with anti-inequality policy, globalization will work to everybody's advantage. It would be a mistake. Even if we could stop it, it would be a mistake to stop it.
Okay. Can I ask more question? A bit following question.
Yeah.
If we think now, because we are in the geopolitical world and have the conflict between Western and Eastern, maybe we have more political issue hidden inside. Like the World Trade Organization try to bring the economic and people better. We know that. But now it look like that when China rise and they can produce and develop their technology and has the more high tech and to be the very high competitive with the Western country. So now, do you think that globalization can do the better thing to reduce the conflict, or can do another thing that make the world better?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that countries that depend on one another economically are less likely to generate conflict, or are less likely to go to war with one another. If I depend on you for my well-being, I have much less incentive to attack you, and vice versa. So yes, I think that globalization is a force for peace. let me give an example where I think globalization on a smaller scale has worked very well. Europe was one of the most violent parts of the world for hundreds of years. France would attack England, or England would attack France, or Germany would attack England and France. This went on over and over again up through 1945. And then it was realized that all of this violence was counterproductive, and a much better strategy would be to try to cooperate. And so the European, first the European community, economic community was formed, and then later the European Union was formed. And miraculously, with the exception of Yugoslavia, miraculously there has been no war between European nations since the end of World War II. I think the absence of war has a lot to do with the fact that European countries have been cooperating economically. So that same principle, I think, extends to the whole world.
Thank you, Professor. I think we just have time for 3 more questions. But it's amazing to see that our audience is very interested and very engaged today. For the next question, can we go to the gentleman in the 3rd row, please?
Sure. Actually, it's Dr. Pisit, right, from the Poromo, right, Poromo from KPI, okay, yeah. Represent on that. I just want to check with you that very simple question. Let's say we cannot stop the globalization, right? This is an impact to us, all of this one. How we survive with this circumstance, the globalization. Let's say the globalization will make the big gap or big different impact to the other people. Income also different, right? Technology also different. How we going to survive with this circumstance?
Well, I don't think we have to survive with these circumstances because we can solve the inequality problem. But we have to make sure we do that. Otherwise we get populist politicians coming to power. My country is no different in that respect.
Of course.
We have had Donald Trump as president, and there's a risk that we'll have him again.
Yes.
And this is mostly because of inequality. Donald Trump came to political power in the first place because he could exploit the fact that so many people were afraid of globalization. But the way to fight Donald Trump is to take action so that people no longer are afraid of globalization, but will actually embrace it. And that's doable, but it requires investment.
Of course.
Okay.
Because let's say, right, my country, right, a lot of people is different of the education. The level of the education also different.
Right.
The technology application also different, right? Because all of the globalization is driven by the technology. Right. That's why I just want to confirm with you. It's not the survive, how to adjust myself to be consistent with this globalization circumstance. Mm-hmm. That is true.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have the second last question from the lady in 4th row, please.
My name is Pintip. Yeah, I'm working in Deposit Insurance Agency. And I'm studying in Poromo 23. Yes, my question is correct. Like everybody here asked whether we can stop globalization, and yes, the answer is not. But the better is moving towards the digitalized globalization. And I'm thinking about if your theory, alternative theory, what is called like taking into consideration of digitalization, how it would be. Because in my opinion, I think like skilled labor and non-skilled labor, if we are like put it more technology or digitalized, there's not quite a gap. I mean, like they could possibly like reduce the gap between them. Is that, do you believe in that? Like the technology will lessen the gap between inequality, right?
I agree with you. I think, again, technology and new technology is often feared because it changes our world and people are afraid of change, but it does have the powerful potential of reducing the gap. And for that reason, I think we should embrace it, not be afraid of it.
Yeah, because probably in the near future, the worker just put the button. I'm not so sure, but it's going to be close enough to that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. ขอบคุณครับ Now we just have a final question that has been conveyed to us via Zoom from one of the students of KPI. So the question is worded as follows. Professor Maskin, can equality be more equally distributed if labor are situated in the area that is not far from where the demand for such labor is located?
So that's a very good question. Do you actually need migration of labor in order to move toward a more equal world? And I think the answer is, to some extent, you do need migration. And again, China provides an example of people moving from rural areas, remote areas of China into the city in order to take manufacturing jobs. But actually, technology should allow us in the future to stay where we are and yet make an economic contribution to many different places in the world, thanks to Zoom and thanks to all of the other communication technology that we now have. You don't have to live in the United States to get an American job anymore. You can live right where you are. And because communication is so much easier and so much cheaper and so much more effective, it still works. So some migration, yes, but not nearly as much as used to be required.
Thank you very much, Professor. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of the Q&A session. On this note, may I please invite everyone to join me in giving Professor Maskin a big round of applause. Now may I ask Professor Maskin to remain just in front of the stage there, and if I may invite Deputy Secretary General Dr. Twinwadi to kindly join Professor Maskin to present the token of appreciation from KPI, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
เดี๋ยวจะมีกล่าวปิดงานนะครับรบกวนพี่ๆแป๊บหนึ่งนะครับเดี๋ยวจะมีกล่าวปิดเดี๋ยวถ่ายด้วยครับได้ครับเดี๋ยวหลังจากถ่ายรูปผู้บริหารเสร็จนะครับจะขออนุญาตถ่ายรูปรวมทุกท่านนะครับรบกวนพี่ๆอยู่ในห้องแป๊บหนึ่งก่อนนะครับเดี๋ยวรบกวนปิดไฟตรงจอนิดหนึ่งนะครับหรือเบาลงนิดหนึ่งครับเดี๋ยวจะขออนุญาตเรียนเชิญท่านอาจารย์ทวินวดีกล่าวปิดแป๊บหนึ่งนะครับ May please invite Dr. Twinwadi to kindly deliver the closing remarks, please.
นักศึกษาที่รักคะขอเวลาแป๊บหนึ่งนะคะ Thank you very much, everyone. As I stand to conclude this remarkable event, I am filled with a profound sense of appreciation. Today we have had the extraordinary privilege of hearing the thoughts of a Nobel Laureate for Economics, whose groundbreaking contributions have shaped our understanding of the design of incentives in economic systems. Firstly, I want to thank Professor Maskin for sharing his ideas about globalization's failure to reduce inequality. You have made this an enlightening and inspiring event. I would also like to thank all participants on site and online for attending and granting your attention to this talk. To all KPI committee members, students, and researchers here today, let this event motivate us toward a long and bright future journey. May we continue to nurture the curiosity that drives us and the determination to reduce inequality for the sake of the development of all humankind. Finally, I must recognize the work of Mr. Uwe Morawetz and the International Peace Foundation in arranging the JAPAN-ASEAN Bridges event series, as well as the contributions of all supporters. Thank you very much. I wish you peace, happiness, and success in your endeavors. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the closing remarks. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of the program. So on behalf of KPI, I would like to express our sincere thanks and appreciation to Professor Maskin, to Chairman Uwe Morawetz, and also to the executives of KPI for this very insightful Nobel Laureate talk. And last but not least, I would like to thank all of the audience who are with us here in this building and online as well for your very, very active participation. I wish you all a pleasant evening, and thank you very much. กราบขอบพระคุณครับ ทางนี้เดี๋ยวจะขออนุญาตเรียนเชิญถ่ายรูปนะครับกับ Professor Maskin แล้วก็ทางท่านอาจารย์ผู้บริหารสถาบันพระปกเกล้านะครับ Professor Maskin if we may invite you onto the stage for the group photo, please.